been an alcoholic for about 20 years. And it became really apparent to me that I couldn't stop. People compare an ayahuasca session to years of therapy, because all of those layers of what you're holding on to or justifying just get shattered.
Better understanding how to raise a child with autism.
And reminding yourself that the universe is bigger than you are. And whether the result that you get is the one that you wanted, it was the result that you needed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out unfiltered truths about menopause with a side of sass and a sprinkle of crass. Get ready to dive into the wild world of hot flashes, mood swings, and all the other joys of being a queenager. This ain't your grandma's podcast. We're here to chat about our passions, our fears, our desires, all while navigating this roller coaster ride of menopause. So grab a glass of wine, beer, tequila, water, whatever your fancy. Kick back and let's ride this hot flash wave together. I'm Courtney Mamusha, and alongside me is my fabulous co-host, Dawn Fable. We are just two outspoken gals who aren't afraid to say it like it is. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Dawn, who will introduce today's amazing guest.
Oh, girl, this might be Grandma's podcast today. I was just looking at myself, and I look like a grandma with a neck brace on, so... Ooh. Might want to switch up the outfits for next time. Oh my gosh. So today I am so excited to welcome our powerhouse guest. She is literally one of the most beautiful human beings I've ever met, Stephanie Simpson. Stephanie and I met. She is the director at Club Services at Club Greenwood here in Denver, but she's also a proud mom of two, a passionate music lover, and a fellow entrepreneur. Stephanie has the most fascinating, inspiring, and vulnerable story, as she shared with me and is about to share with all of you through Sobriety, her experience in recovery through Ayahuasca, and her deeply personal journey with the conception of IVF. Stephanie has also shattered the stigmas and opened up the challenges many women face. She's here to share her story, balancing motherhood, a thriving career, and the unique challenge of raising the most beautiful boy on the autism spectrum. I certainly was so inspired by Stephanie's vulnerability, her strength, and your insight to really open up to others. So grab a seat, turn up the volume, and welcome, Stephanie. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. Ooh, that was quite an intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, truly, I mean, you know, when you and I first met, I felt like I had known you for a lifetime. And I so respected and appreciated your vulnerability. And right out of the gates, you just opened up. And I feel like that is such an incredible quality of women, and certainly one that we like to attract and we like to encourage, you know, women on our podcast to be more vulnerable and be more open. And that's why we're here to shatter a lot of these stigmas and really, you know, talk to inspiring women like you.
Yeah. What I want to talk about is, you know, we're in the end phases of dry January. So many of my friends are going through this dry January, taking a break from drinking. I am not a quitter, so I decided to continue drinking. But there's so many people who probably feel lost and, you know, addicted to alcohol. And I know that you've changed your whole life around this. Alcoholism, I think, can feel like this dark secret society, right? Like nobody you don't want to tell anybody that you're drinking X, Y, and Z. But give us a little background on like what your moment of clarity was when you were like, I'm done with this. Like enough is enough. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, to say that my moment of clarity, I must have had 100, you know, over the course of probably 15 years is how long I recognized that alcohol was not doing me any favors, and that it was something that I couldn't stop using. I mean, a dry January was pretty much impossible, probably from the age of 23 on. And for me, I've been an alcoholic for about 20 years, and my lifestyle was such that I was able to be a high functioning alcoholic. It never really interfered with my professional life. It interfered with my personal life, and there was repercussions, you know, due to my heavy drinking, but nothing really opened my eyes to how much more I needed to stop drinking than the fear that I had that I couldn't. Because at a certain point with any chemical, you become physiologically addicted, right? And so you reach this point where your will might be strong to quit, but your body is not going to allow you to. And so that whole quagmire, probably of a decade of knowing I needed to stop drinking, being fearful of what that looked like, holding on to the thought that I could drink responsibly, which was really a pipe dream for a long time. Yeah, I would call it about 5-6 years ago was when I started looking at actual solutions, right? AA, rehabs, what can I do to get assistance with something that had become unmanageable in my life? And I found some relief. I found some sobriety. Some of that was the byproduct of legal intervention, so forced sobriety, and then a false sense of security that I didn't need to drink because I couldn't, right? Or pregnancies when you're not drinking. But it became really apparent to me that I couldn't stop, and I just looked for alternative solutions. At the time, a friend of mine recommended an ayahuasca treatment facility down in Costa Rica that specializes in everything from addiction to trauma. And I was not super keen on it, just because in my mind, I had never tried a psychedelic. I'd never tried any other drug, so to speak, than alcohol. But that's where I found myself. And I was at a place where I recognized that my life was not going to be able to continue in the manner that I'd been trying to force it for about 5 years. And so this was my only solution. I went down there pretty drunk. I wasn't able to remain sober physically, just, would get the shakes and things like that. I was up to probably 20 beers a day for about a 4-year period of my life. So that means getting up in the middle of the night to drink. I got down there and, ayahuasca is a plant medicine. There's a lot of stigmas around kind of psychedelics and things like that. But I jumped in with both feet because I didn't really have a choice. My back was against a wall. And I think a lot of addicts or people that think they have a problem, get themselves to a place where they're really ready to quit, so to speak. It usually takes 3 or 4 times to really be at that place where you have no qualms about giving something up that's become your lifestyle. And that's where I was. I recognized that I could probably die from a seizure, because that's what happens if you're that dependent on the drug for that long. But I was ready. I knew I was going to die of alcoholism either way. So yeah, I went down to this facility. It's called Rhythmia in Costa Rica, and people come from all over the world. It's a week-long process, and essentially you do therapy in the morning, kind of speaking through what it is that you're looking to heal or what sort of traumas that you've been through, and then you do these ceremonies at night, which hands down are the hardest thing I've ever done. They're brutal. The medicine is yucky. It makes you purge from both directions, makes you hallucinate. It really brings to the surface all of your fears and guilt and shame. But I can speak more about it if you guys want me to. At the end of that week, I got back on the plane. I have never had a drink since. I haven't had an inclination to drink. And I can only really describe it as a miracle. I had built my entire life and identity around alcohol and or hiding alcohol. And the freedom that I now have is something that I wish I could give to anybody struggling with addiction, because it's a terrible, terrible disease. There's so many things that go into the hiding of it, the shame, the powerlessness, the confidence that it takes away from you, obviously the relationships. So yeah, that's where I am today, and certainly wouldn't be here without that alternative treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. My brother lost his wife. She died at 40 of alcoholism. So, I think it's really courageous to do what you did and share your story and save your life. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I've been so inspired by you, and we've had the opportunity to really dig deep into your experience. And interestingly, last night I watched the Aaron Rodgers documentary, and there's a lot about ayahuasca in that documentary. And for those of you who have interest in it, it's certainly a documentary that I would recommend to you. And I know, Stephanie, you're very open about speaking to people about your experience too. But, for those of us who aren't familiar with ayahuasca, it isn't exactly the 9 to 5 therapy session, right? It's not like you're sitting on a couch across from someone trying to call you out on your psychobabble bullshit. What, aside from desperation, what called you to try it, and what truths, if you're comfortable sharing, did it reveal about yourself and your journey?
Yeah. So the premise of the actual active ingredient in ayahuasca and a lot of psychedelics, it causes your brain to sort of disassociate with itself. So you have your rational mind, you know why you do certain things, and you explain that. When you're under the influence of this medicine, it doesn't allow you to kind of not be really truthful, right? So it shows you your ugly, ugly side. It shows you things that have been done to you that were ugly. And so the whole process of purging is something that fundamentally outside, like different than talk therapy, is you're healing yourself, right? You're releasing the shame, namely, was what came up for me, right? The years of not living up to my potential, of taking advantage of people who loved me, of making terrible decisions, all of that shame, which in my opinion is really what keeps anyone in an addiction, right? I mean, it's a cycle. You know you have lost control. You don't want to be who you've become. At this point, you're chemically addicted to something you don't want to be. And that powerlessness just continues and continues. And in my opinion, that's why a lot of people can never find sobriety. It's just too difficult. And so under the influence of that DMT, or that chemical compound, your brain shows you the deepest, darkest recesses of your. And in that purging process, in that release, an actual physical release of kind of stored trauma, there's the new freedom, right? And part of it is that you feel a lot of the time like you're dying, like you've lost your mind, like, gosh, I'm never going to be able to function again. It's definitely a scary experience for those of us that, I guess, pride themselves in being very heady. So that release of control, which seems very counterintuitive, was really the secret sauce to, again, not just addiction, but for other people who've utilized it for trauma or PTSD, is really releasing what it is that you've held on to. And in talk therapy, you can release things and you can talk through them. But people compare an ayahuasca session or psychedelic session to years of therapy, because all of those layers of what you're holding on to or justifying or trying to explain just get shattered. So it's a very humbling experience, particularly something when you're sharing it with dozens of other people. There's all sorts of ceremonies that are done around the world, but that's the second element that I think is really important to healing any sort of addiction or trauma, is you're going through this experience with complete strangers, and it brings back the understanding of the world is just bigger than you and your problems and the universe, right? And we're all much more similar than we are different. And so I think part of the unique experience of doing something like this in a different place was recognizing that isolation that comes with addiction and all of those feelings would be my choice to hold on to if I wanted to, right? And when they no longer serve you and there's more to life than what you've been living, and other people are going through this same sort of catharsis, it really cements that I'm no longer alone. I don't have to be afraid of my past, and it's my choice to move forward in a healthier fashion with whatever that baggage is.
I want to, because I definitely want to do it. Dawn and I have been talking about it, but just on like the level of getting sick, and we don't have to go into like gory details, but is this like they give you medicine and then every night you're like puking for 5 hours? I just need to know. I need to wrap my head around this a little bit.
I would say it is difficult to wrap your head around it. And the documentary that Dawn mentioned, it showcases some of it. The premise of the medicine is that everybody reacts to it differently. Some people react mostly with vomiting, some people with, mostly diarrhea, etc. Some people don't have either of those. And what they tell you is that it's a smart medicine. It's called Mother Ayahuasca. And in the tribal, in the shamanic tradition, because this is actually, made in the Amazon, it's a very spiritual process, is that the medicine is going to, as long as you're drinking it and you're trying and you're in the process and your truths are your truths, right? You're looking for answers, that it'll show you what you need. So every night, honestly, was very different for me. The first night I took like 4 servings. There was a large guy next to me that took 1 who retched for 5 hours, and I wasn't retching at all. So, it's kind of an interesting concept. Everybody doesn't respond the exact same way. But fundamentally, and then this, the second night, there's all sorts of music and kind of smoke and different sort of chanting, which again, coming from this like Western culture, Western medicine sort of a background, definitely felt a little bit weird and cultish, right? Like, what am I doing in the jungle? And this can't possibly work for me. But I think that just goes back to another theme in my life, which is trust. As somebody who's been a high achiever and is used to forging my own pathways and understanding what's next, that was really the enlightening part, is you have to relinquish this control, right? I mean, if you want to discover more about yourself, you clearly don't have all the answers. Look where you are. You're struggling with addiction. You're miserable. And so that entire process looks different to everybody. But the premise generally is that you're asking to see who you've become, which is generally pretty ugly, right? If you're holding on to resentment or you're holding on to trauma, you've got a lot of anger. Then you kind of ask the medicine to merge you back with your soul. So the idea is that, and I think in a lot of Western psychiatry, they speak to the fact that we all have kind of a break from self at a young age, right? It could be something traumatic, it could be something small, but we build up over time these understandings of how the world works. and then we operate under them, right? Maybe we learn that people won't do things for you if you don't do things for them, right? And so you become an adult with all these layers of context around your psyche, when fundamentally you really want to be like you were when you were 4 or 5, right? Trusting, joyful, unadulterated by reality. And so the concept of ayahuasca is shedding what isn't serving you, coming back to that place of love, and namely love for yourself, because the byproduct of a lot of addiction or trauma is self-hatred, self-loathing, and unhealthy behaviors. So however that process looks to people over the course of that 4 nights, they generally have a 95% success rate of leaving there with a new sense of balance, quite frankly, right? You know, what can I control? What can't I control? And I used to say part of it is that when you're retching in a room with 80 people on mattresses, not only is your ego going to take a hit and you're going to get reminded about how human you really are, but you're going to really discover what's important, right? When you think you're going to die, the plane's going down, you're like, why didn't I do this? And so fundamentally, I think there's an element of that too. You put yourself in this extremely uncomfortable physical position so that you come back to what matters, you know, what do I want to focus on, and how much space can I create between myself and the world around me so that I can respond to life and not react to it.
Oh my gosh. You know, what an interesting thing that we're learning about, right? This is truly Mother Nature. This is plant-based medicine. This is going back to the fundamentals of loving yourself and uncovering childhood trauma, right? Or any sort of trauma or PTSD that has presented itself in your life. Yet we as a society and big pharma is overtaking and trying to prescribe. And on top of it all, there's such a stigma or negative connotation with utilizing plant-based medicine that, you know, people are feeling shame to actually be considering it or to do it. And so thank you for sharing your experience and being so vulnerable, because I think this conversation is going to open up to a lot of other women of really considering this form of therapy when perhaps they might not have otherwise.
The last thing I would love to mention is part of it is about finding your breath, right? And we talk about it all. I work at a health club. I don't even get to take yoga classes because it's, you know, it's hard. It's hard to sit in stillness. It's hard to meditate. It's hard to kind of build up the muscles in your brain that allow you to breathe through difficult situations. And I believe that the ayahuasca forces you into that place. You are alone. You feel physically horrible, mentally horrible, and people around you are making awkward noises, right? There's a lot of dissonance. And so I believe that environment, it's created on purpose, right? Lots of music, lots of dissonance, lots of smoke. You know, the woman in the corner is bothering you with the way that she sounds. It brings up all this stuff. And you're forced, because these ceremonies are about 8-9 hours long, to breathe. The only way you're going to get through it is if you find your breath and if you focus on yourself. And so by training that muscle hundreds of times, you know, every minute for 8 hours over 4 nights, I went back into the real world realizing that I just didn't have the same triggers anymore. The triggers that used to make me want to drink or the triggers that used to make me frustrated. I had built up a lot of distance between other people and myself. And that is the real gift. And I think it's the real chance that it gives addicts to really recover for good. Because when your only response to something has been to use a substance or perhaps to act in a certain way, unless you have a little bit of time to think about whether that's the right decision, you're just going to keep doing it. We're creatures of habit. And so a lot of the ayahuasca and the psychedelic premise is, you know, as if you had trained in meditation for a decade, you get this gift of, I wouldn't call it like enlightenment or anything like that, but to a certain degree, it gives you this gift of deciding how you want to react in this world and giving yourself that space and time to breathe and make choices, whereas it used to just be kind of primal. So, yeah. It's fascinating. And I will say this about ayahuasca, because most of the people down at the place that I went to are from really famous rehab centers. An addictive substance is something that you need more of over time to produce the same results. And it's also something that if you quit using, you'll have withdrawals. Ayahuasca is neither of those things. I didn't get on the plane and think, I wish I could have some ugly brown juice so I could vomit, right? There was no withdrawal or desire. And I actually went back not too long ago for a second round. And it was the truth. I actually only needed like a cup every night to get me to a place where I was discovering new things about myself. So I think a lot of the stigmas, even my own parents and other people in my life with the psychedelic or a drug that's illegal in the United States, were pretty freaked out. But at the end of the day, the drug of alcohol, which is what it is, and the commercialization and the sexifying of it is really despicable, right? That's an actual drug that can kill you, that's addictive, that most of us enjoy or certainly see around us every single day. So it is interesting.
Well, I know probably deep down inside, a lot of you wanting to cure yourself and help yourself, and even going back for the second journey is maybe around motherhood. I mean, I know you have two beautiful kids now, a beautiful daughter that we got to see the other day. I know that you're raising one who has autism, right? And that is such a struggle in itself. And I'm sure, not having gone through what you've gone through, if I were you, I would be grabbing a drink every night. So, it's really challenging. I really wanted to just maybe talk about some other mothers who might be struggling and better understanding how to raise a child with autism and, what you might have understood and want to share about your journey with this.
Sure. Yeah. The spectrum, right? Everybody talks about it, and it's such an appropriate word because unlike other disabilities, every child on the spectrum is so different. So you can't just talk to the doctor or to other moms about certain things because the milestones are very different, and it's really a moving target. So my son was diagnosed when he was 18 months. It was pretty apparent to me that between eye contact and kind of speech delays, we needed some assistance. He just turned 5. And gosh, you're correct in the fact that for a while it was like, why me, right? Like, I'm not equipped for this. I don't know how to do this. One of the basic tenets of my upbringing was, not to take up space, right? And if you're in public, make sure that you're cognizant of everybody around you, da, 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 da. So when I have a child who has different needs, who, by the way, doesn't look like he has different needs, I found it really difficult to go to McDonald's or go somewhere because it was highly likely that there would be a scene and there would be people that would be judging, my ability as a mother, et cetera. And so as I've reflected on the whys, my son was totally given to me and my husband for a reason, right? He has forced me to take up space, to own, who he is, who I am, and to also be okay with that, right? He, in particular, his speech is catching up and things like that, but we have a lot of social norms that will never be innate for him. So I'm never going to hear him, not never, at the current time, if I say I love you, I don't get an I love you back. The reciprocity and kind of the challenges of anybody with toddlers. Your 2s, your 3s are all about emotional development and being able to identify emotions and things like that. Well, emotions are one of the difficult parts for children on the spectrum. They don't identify them the same way. They don't react the same way. And so this entire period of his life in the last couple of years have been super challenging in that, just like any other kid, how do you balance, are these boundaries he's pushing because he's a toddler, or are these boundaries he's pushing because of his limitations? And we've gone through a lot. I mean, I think the resources for children with autism are increasing, but they're very difficult to find in the sense that every child is different. That means every single solution is different. So finding a way for him to operate in society, which is fundamentally the difficult thing for most people on the spectrum, involves allowing him to be in society, right? And so if there's no schools where he can also be around children that are not neurodivergent to see, by example, what it is that's expected of him, there's no solution. And I think there's a lot of people stuck in that, which makes me very sad. But at the end of the day, it's funny. I now, when I see the word autism, when I say the word autism, I see it as an AWE. Like, I'm in awe. Like, the child is supremely intelligent. He is kind beyond belief. And the way that he looks at the how of the world, not the why, right? He doesn't ask, why is that car going so fast or whatever. He looks at this in a looks at the world differently, right? And that's forced me to have to say, yeah, so do I, right? And what are you seeing in this, and how can I support you? And I think the blessing of autism on the flip side is that he doesn't see the snickers. He doesn't see the parents that are looking at me like I'm, completely inept. And that's also a reinforcement of kind of what I was speaking to with the ayahuasca, which is at a certain point, you have to be able to recognize that you are only in control of how you feel, right? People can look at you funny. They can look at him funny. His peers can look, and does it matter? Not really, right? Unless I choose to let it. And so he's a constant reinforcement of, operate out of love, be as childlike as you possibly can be, and just recognize you never know what's going on in someone else's life, right? I mean, that's the one thing that's difficult is he doesn't look like there's anything different about him. And I think people are very quick to judge parenting in general, which is just a dirty shame, quite frankly, because darn, it's hard, right?
I feel like he has it's the secret sauce to life. Like, I need to be more.
He's a pretty happy dude. Yeah, exactly.
You've embraced your son and autism in such a beautiful way. And gosh, hearing you say, now I see it as awe, AWE, is magnificent. I mean, that is just so touching. And I feel like if we could see the world a little bit more through the eyes of someone who's so gifted and who sees life through your son's eyes, we just would be in a better place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I was just going to say the last thing is that it's like, because he sees things differently, he behaves differently. And every night, as much as I try not to, the anxiety of what does this look like as he gets older, right? He doesn't understand physical space. He likes to touch people's heads, right? Which is just not acceptable in society, right? So that's the thing that will be interesting. It is amazing, but until you get to know him pretty well, a lot of his behaviors look pretty funky, right? And again, it just reminds you like, well, why is that a social construct? Well, of course, right? Safety first, et cetera, things like this. But the general premise of my son is that he wants to be near you. He wants to get to know you. And he thinks that, touching and physical touch is okay. And for now, good, right? And we will cross those bridges when we get to it. And thankfully, we have a really understanding school, some fantastic therapists, and educating the children's parents as well, right? Because that's how they get educated is what does inclusion look like? When our son does something funny in the classroom, what does that mean? How can we all just support each other, right?
Yeah. So talk to us about that because, as neurodiversity is increasingly prominent in so many of our schools, and we as parents are trying to help our children navigate and be kind and not draw attention to the neurodiversity, what would your advice be to us as parents on how we can help our children embrace and understand those differences? Because so often adults don't even know how to do that, right? They get uncomfortable and don't know how to do that. So what would your advice be to other parents and or other children who can understand how to be graceful in that type of situation?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Because as you mentioned, we just had a daughter and it doesn't seem as though she's neurodivergent. She might be, but I think it all boils down to kind of the same theme that I've been utilizing quasi-successfully in my life, which is the responding, not reacting, right? I think when a child sees something that's aberrant or an adult sees something that's not typical, a behavior or something, we generally have a reaction, right? And I think that's the bigger picture is we react to things because of something inside of ourselves, right? All of our reactions are a byproduct of something inside of us that we don't understand, we don't like. And so that common theme of when you operate in the world and something's happening that you don't understand, what should your first response be? And I think for me, the success I've found is in love, right? If I assume the best in people, if I assume that even if my son does something that is discouraging to me, that he didn't mean to, right? I'm always going to be a happier person and respond better when my assumption is out of love. And so I think that's the same thing I would tell parents is as the classrooms become more diverse and as children's needs or proclivities are varied or might be different than your own child, teaching your child that the first thing to do when you see something that's a little bit off is to ask questions, to find out more. To my son, maybe, why did you touch my hair? And he'll tell you it's yellow. I think it's pretty versus you touched my hair, right? I mean, things like that. And so I think it's the questioning. It's reminding us to be more childlike, more trusting, more assuming of good. And then to have those really good conversations, because believe me, I'm sure that many things my son will do in his life will warrant some corrective action, but to other people whose job that isn't, right? Or to his peers who will greatly influence his ability to have confidence and operate in this world. It's just be inquisitive, right? The more you know, the better off you are in any capacity in life. And I think it's the same thing with the parents, right? You're quick to judge, you're quick to protect your own child. Something was done. And the less reactive you can be, and the more holistic you can be in understanding a situation, you might recognize that whatever might have happened to your child might be the best learning they ever get, right? There's always a positive. And in the world that I live in and that I love, one of the big gifts my parents gave me was an extensive amount of travel at a young age. And it just required me to be much more nimble intellectually, right? I mean, not everything you see is what you think it is. Find out more, decide how you want to react, but gather. Because the moment we just channel and we get tunnel vision is when we really make mistakes, right? We make judgments and things that we sometimes can't take back. So that's kind of the message is take a breath, take a look, ask the questions, and then make a reasonable determination. But certainly with neurodivergence and the spectrum, every situation is going to be unique.
Yeah, I'd say unique and without downplaying this, like difficult, right? So you've dealt with a lot of difficulties throughout your life. And, again, when you were saying why me, I think a lot of us resonate with that. Another difficult topic I wanted to bring up is your journey with IVF. I mean, it is no joke. I've seen people emotionally, physically, exhaustingly deal with this, the ups and the downs. So if you would be so gracious to, explain a little bit of your journey, what surprised you the most about IVF, like how did you keep on going, keep that energy up, and, maybe some other women who are out there struggling, if you have any, advice for them.
Yeah, gosh, it's such a controversial subject too. I was thinking about that the other day. There's a whole new host of moral questions that come about with IVF, and it's such a new concept that if you haven't gone through it and you haven't been faced with some of those, it's pretty daunting. So we ended up needing to utilize IVF after our son was born because his birth left me in a position that it was not likely that we would be able to have another child. And as a byproduct of his diagnosis, my husband and I felt really strongly that he would benefit from a sibling, that his ability to operate in the world long term would greatly be enhanced with a sibling. So we went down that path. And, as any woman can probably attest to, the things you do for your kids are amazing, right? I can't even look at a needle without having an ayahuasca response, quite frankly. And so when I started all the, shots and injections and things like that, it was actually fairly empowering because I knew that regardless of the result, whether or not it was successful or not, I had overcome something as somebody who was doing something for their child, right? So that's always empowering. I'd like to say that I attributed a lot of my mood swings to all the hormones and that's exactly what it came from. Who knows? But let's just say that for now. So that was difficult. I mean, really actually injecting something, particularly in sobriety, into my body, I've become so much more aware, right, of what I put in my body because Lord knows I never want to be back in a place like I was. So even to this day, like I don't take many medicines or anything like that because I just don't like the feeling of not being in control. Again, a deficit I need to work on. So that was a difficult process. You're injecting these hormones, you're responding as such. The thing that I think was the hardest about the journey, going back to a common theme though, was really knowing that this might not work, right? And it doesn't work for some people. And the time, the money, the physical commitment, throwing all those chips on the table and then recognizing that it's beyond you. Again, it's just a big exercise in reminding yourself that the universe is bigger than you are, right? And whether the result that you get is the one that you wanted, it was the result that you needed. And that's a huge concept that's easy to say and super difficult to live by. But I believe that partially through the ayahuasca experience and partially just through alcoholism, right? Realizing like I had no control. I was going to drink every day. I was going to make myself sicker. I was going to make poor decisions. So all of that lack of control, turning it into a positive of saying, it is what it is, and it was meant to be this way. So we did an implantation. We were really fortunate to have a healthy baby girl born 6 months ago yesterday. And I feel that now that I've gone through it and have had a lot of friends go through it as well, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the course of the next decade or so with all the political conversation around life and when that begins. And I think all I would say is that anybody who's going through it or anybody who knows someone who is, it is super personal. It is just like politics. And what we should be thinking about is their needs, their desires, their choices should be respected and shown, the respect that they deserve because they're huge life decisions, right? And technology can be, and advances in medicine can be good and bad. But what it is doing is offering people some options that they didn't have before. And that is good, in my opinion. That is the right direction for science. So,
Stephanie for president.
Yeah. Well, or the head coach of the Broncos. Every time I watch a game, I'm like,
both great jobs.
Yeah, either one, kind of equal. Yeah. So yeah, it's just a difficult journey. And if you haven't been through it, just like if you're not the mother of a child with special needs, you don't know what you don't know. And best bet in life is to just lead with love and patience and understanding. Assume that the other person is putting on a brave face because they usually are.
I hope you write a book. Like, I feel like you need to create like your own podcast, write a book, do something that is just sharing this innate wisdom. And maybe it's the ayahuasca that has made you so wise. And if that's the case, like
we're signing up.
yeah,
That's what we'll do the next time.
Okay, let's go vomit in the jungle.
I love it. A team vomit session.
That's what it is. Well, that's sweet of you. Yeah, it is really, I am really happy at 41, just turned 41. But I finally feel like my life makes sense. And I think that had I not battled addiction, severely ruined relationships, absolutely, made it such that my life was really unlivable, and gotten through that and found that strength. If I hadn't had additional challenges, I wouldn't be who I am. But I think that the biggest gift, like I said, is just reminding yourself that in any situation, the one power you have is your emotion, your response. Nobody can make you feel any way. You have to allow that, right? And so as we go through life and we feel like the world is dealing us a bad hand, or someone's being rude, or we're allowing other people's feelings to get into ours. I'm an uber empath. I mean, this was a big, big thing for me, is just remembering, like, I have the choice right now. This person is yelling at me. They're trying to make me feel small. My son is throwing a fit. Like, what do I do? Right now I have a choice. How do I want to feel? Right? And that's huge.
I so appreciate you taking on that, and owning that and really empowering others to be like that, because through years of therapy, I've recognized that I have lived very much in a victim cycle, right? And I think we as human beings tend to do that, is we're very victimized. You could have been very victimized by your alcoholism, and you could have been living in the victim cycle of, your journey with fertility. And you could have been living in the victim cycle with, your beautiful boy, right? Who happens to be on the spectrum. And so what a beautiful lesson to all of us, whether we're feeling victimized by, a teacher, or by a friend, or by a family member, or by our own life experiences, that, like, stop living in the victim cycle and start taking accountability for this. And so what you've done is so admirable.
People that are close to me laugh, because the one thing I got out of a rehab stint before I got sober was a concept that's called DBT, and I'm just a big fan, so I have to mention it. But it's called dialectical behavior therapy, and there's a whole notebook of all sorts of things. But the premise is that, we all have a reasonable mind. We all know, like, reason, logic, reasonable stuff, and then we have an emotional mind, right? How we respond to things, and they're just urges and feelings. And the way that we want to be in this world is somewhere in between, right? We want to balance those two things and be wise in what we do. And this one worksheet that I remember taught you how to replace the word but with and. And so in any situation, an internal conversation or one that you're having out loud, when you use the word but, right? Like, I want to eat a hamburger, but I'm trying to lose weight. Well, the second part of that sentence becomes less important, right? The scale's not even. If you say, I want to eat a hamburger and I'm trying to lose weight, it's like both of these things are true. I want the burger. I also want to lose weight, right? All of a sudden, you take away all this kind of gravity of this is worse, this is better. And just in doing that throughout my life internally, like, my son is really, a lot of work right now. And his language is improving, right? I always try to think of, like, these are two things. And these outbursts are helping him understand his feelings more, right? But using the word but would always limit me. So just one of those tools that I use constantly, and people make fun of me because if I slip up with a but, I'm quick to correct with an and. But it has really helped me in my life, because it allows me to just look at everything as, like, you can go on forever. You can say, I want to eat a hamburger and I want to lose weight, and the burger place is really close, and I might be late to pick up my son. They're all just equal. These are all true statements. Nothing has to be untrue or true. You can have seemingly conflicting ideas coexist. And I think that's the same thing with interpersonal relationships. Nobody has to be right or wrong. You can feel a certain way and I can feel a certain way, and both can coexist, right? I can have an internal dialogue that's not very healthy, and I can have one that's healthy, and that makes me who I am, right? Nothing is good or bad. It just takes away the gravity of being human, right? Because we're just humans.
Court, we need to have Stephanie as an extension of, like, therapy at Hot Flash Health, because she's got wiser advice than, like, most of these therapists out there that you're paying $175
For
an
sure.
hour.
You're like my motivational coach now. I'm like,
call me up. I'm really good at telling other people what to do. Terrible at following it myself usually.
well, I know, you've built a career around music and obviously motivation and movement. Can you talk to us a little bit about the fitness world and what you're doing there and how people who are scared can turn their passion into business.
Well, so fitness was always just kind of a passion, as you mentioned. I mean, music, goodness gracious. I had older siblings, like 9 and 11 years older than me. So I grew up listening to Bob Marley and Led Zeppelin. I was like the only 6-year-old singing Three Little Birds.
Whose older siblings' friends I used to dry hump, by the way.
And
fast.
When I lived in Newport Beach, I lived in California, and fitness is everywhere there. I kind of fell in love with this rhythm cycling. I just thought it was so cool that people were enjoying cardio, right? Cardio to me was like you get on a treadmill, you count down the minutes. So anyways, I became an instructor out there. When I moved back to Denver, I started teaching bar as well. And it's always just been something that I find a lot of fulfillment in, right? When you see people excited to do something hard, to me, that's just really rewarding. My whole life, my father was an entrepreneur. So my whole life, I've kind of helped start new businesses. I'm one of those just problem solvers. I mean, my current employer would tell you that I need to keep my hand down. I'm just a hand raiser. I don't think that I think I can do things better than other people. If I see a problem, I want to fix it. Thankfully, now that I'm 41 and my back hurts and I'm just old, I'm finding some limits to the yeses and the hand raising.
And really quickly, Court, along our style, Stephanie had this brilliant idea to create champagne in a keg.
Yeah.
And so that's one of her many businesses that she started. But talk about a problem solved.
And you need a large amount of something, quick delivery, consistent delivery. Yeah, that was a problem, and I needed to solve it. Quickly kind of departed from the alcohol applications just in the interest of my mental health. But everything from kind of a commercial coating, a 2-component paint that functions as a dry erase board, helped some friends launch that company. Had some small businesses in the wedding industry. But to me, I'm happiest when I'm a little overwhelmed. It's a very fine line. If I'm overwhelmed, but not too overwhelmed, perfect. So dialing that in is always a struggle. But so at the current time, I manage kind of client services, member club services for Club Greenwood, which is here in Greenwood Village, teach bar and cycling for them. And like I said, just look for holes, try to fill them, kind of opening up a pro shop here, balancing that with motherhood. It's funny because I think most women will agree. There's a certain element of being at home and being with your kids, at least for people that have had careers, that's rewarding. And then just like what I described, it's a very fine line. Also needing to be somewhere else and to be needed and to have conversations with people who aren't going to, cry, etc. And so I don't know that I've found my stride yet, but I'm super grateful for the support of my family that allows me to have my hands in a couple different things so that on any given day I can just release what's burning me and pick up what's not. So, but I do. I love teaching fitness. I love watching people get healthier, get happier. Had I never been an alcoholic and didn't understand what a false sense of endorphins felt like through copious amounts of beer and wine, working out is the natural way to give yourself a boost. And boy, is it hard, and boy, is it usually not fun. If I can encourage people to come to classes and they enjoy it, then that's a huge gift. Yeah.
Steph, at Club Greenwood, you guys have hundreds of classes a week, and you obviously have experience in teaching and talking to the members over there and seeing results. As we as women, in our mid-40s who are sort of in that menopausal journey, fitness looks different for us, right? Fitness and diet look different for us. So if you could give one piece of advice around movement and fitness and diet for that middle-aged woman, what would it be? You hear a lot about, heavy strength training, less cardio, macros versus micros, but from your mouth and your experience, what is a piece of advice for us?
Yeah, it's funny because we were just dealing with this. Whenever we make changes at the club, it's a big problem, right? And people don't like change. And I laugh because the irony of the fact in fitness is if you don't make changes, you don't get results, right? I love teaching spin. I love teaching bar. But if I don't do something different that I don't want to do, I'll stay the same, right? So that's the big piece of advice is regardless of, if it's scary, it's probably right? If it hurts or if it's challenging, it's probably the right thing to do. So as far as fitness goes, I just always encourage people to keep it fresh, right? Don't keep doing the same classes at the same time, at the same cadence, with the same intention, because you'll have the same body no matter how many times you do it. It's funny on the diet side. I'm one of those people where you can't tell me I can't eat something, right? It was just like alcohol, because I'm going to then eat it. So I feel like the general rule I always have is, if you really want to eat it, eat it. Don't you dare second guess it. Don't you dare eat half of it, right? Eat what you want to eat. And the less you take that stigma, but the more you take the stigma off of what you're eating and how many calories or fat grams or whatever, the healthier and happier you're going to be, and the less you're going to crave it. It's a forbidden fruit thing to me. So I'm not really a rebel, but when it comes to you telling me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. So my own internal dialogue around that is always, whatever looks good, whatever you think is going to fuel your body correctly, go for it. And moderation is the key, right? You don't do it every day. I mean, of course, a slice of pizza looks good every day, but if it's not from my favorite place and, I had one yesterday, I probably won't. But just, again, realizing that what you put into your body is important, what your exertion is important. But in my mind, it's all about your mind and your outlook, right? If you think that you're going to look good in a bathing suit, you're going to look good in a bathing suit. If you are fearful of going to Olive Garden because you're going to have 19 breadsticks, like, you're going to be locked in fear. So again, it's just that mental discussion with yourself, which is, what is it that I'm really looking for? Do I need it? Do I want it? Where's it coming from? But taking what am I trying to say? The spotlight off of what we're eating and how much of it is the first step, because to me, that's why we have problems, right? We're obsessed, and we can't be. It's unhealthy.
And we're still listening to 20-year-old teeny boppers on Instagram telling us to do shit that worked for us, in college. So,
yeah, well, I'll have to talk to you more as I enter that phase of my life, because I recognize the season of eating whatever you want, might be over. But I think it goes back to kind of the same thing, where it's really about living that life that you want, acting as though you already have what you want, or having the internal dialogue as if you've already got the body or got the closure around a situation that you already have. Because if you don't, you're just wasting time.
Yeah.
You may or may not get the body you want. You may or may not get the closure that you're looking for in a relationship. But if you decide to live as though you have the things you want, you'll be 10 times happier, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of living and going after the things that you want, and I know I probably speak for Courtney too, I would like more Stephanie Simpson in my life. You are such a breath of fresh air and such a beautiful human, inside and out. And I think that the conversation that you have shared with our listeners today is really going to shatter stigmas, break through, and I know that you're such a kind individual, and you've offered to speak to other people who are interested in your experience or going through a difficult time. So certainly reach out to us at Hot Flash Health, and you can find Stephanie. Will put you in contact, but we would love more of you on this podcast, because I think you're such a gift. So thank you for your time. And Court, we'll wrap it up.
Yes, we can't wait to plan a journey with you. Maybe we can video it, not the bad parts. But anyways, yeah, thank you again. And for everyone listening, remember, menopause may be a wild ride, but together we've got this. So don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, because it's still up, Facebook, at Hot Flash Health. Stream and subscribe to us on your favorite listening platform, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And like Don said, share your thoughts with us anytime. We love hearing from you. If you have ideas for guests, just want to connect with Stephanie because she's so cool. But until next time, everybody stay sassy, stay fabulous, and keep those hot flashes in check.